The alien warrior said, "Don't touch that," but moments later, she marked me as her mate. The emergency klaxon screamed through the research station as Jake Mitchell sprinted down the corridor, his boots pounding against metal grating. Behind him, the containment breach had turned the xenobiology lab into a war zone. 3 security guards lay unconscious, and the supposedly dormant alien artifact now pulsed with energy that made his teeth ache. He slid around a corner and collided with something that shouldn't exist on a human station. The warrior stood 7 feet tall, her scaled armor gleaming purple and silver under the emergency lights. Her eyes, brilliant gold with vertical pupils, locked onto him with predatory focus. 4 arms ending in clawed hands moved with liquid precision as she raised a weapon that hummed with contained violence. "Don't touch that," she said, her voice resonating in his mind rather than his ears. "The artifact behind you will kill everything on this station." Jake glanced back. The sphere he'd accidentally activated floated 3 feet off the ground, tendrils of crimson energy lashing outward. Every surface they touched turned to ash. "I didn't mean to activate it," Jake said, raising his hands. "I'm a linguist, not a soldier. I was just cataloging the symbols." The warrior's stance shifted, her secondary arms reaching for devices on her belt. "Your species has no concept of restraint. You find ancient weapons and treat them like puzzles." She moved past him with speed that defied her size, planting 4 cylindrical objects around the artifact. Blue light formed a containment field that made the red energy recoil, but the sphere pulsed harder, cracks forming in the blue barrier. "It's adapting," she said. "Your tampering woke it fully. Now it recognizes living targets." "How do I help?" Jake asked, moving beside her. She turned, and something flickered across her alien features. Surprise, maybe. Or assessment. "You don't run?" "Where would I go? This station holds 300 people. My daughter's in the education wing." The warrior's gold eyes narrowed. "You have a juvenile here? In a military research facility?" "It's not military," Jake said. "We study dead languages and cultural artifacts. At least that's what we thought this was." The artifact pulsed again, and this time the containment field shattered. The warrior moved with brutal efficiency, her upper arms firing weapons that created temporal distortion fields around the tendrils. Her lower arms worked on a device that projected holographic symbols. "Read these," she commanded. "Your species activated it. Perhaps your voice pattern can put it in stasis." Jake scanned the floating symbols. His training kicked in, recognizing patterns similar to Proto-Sumerian but inverted. He began reading aloud, phonetically translating sounds that felt wrong on human vocal cords. The artifact's pulsing slowed. The warrior added her own voice, creating a harmonic resonance that made the air crystallize. Together, their voices wound around the sphere like chains of sound. Then, everything went silent. The artifact dropped inert, the emergency klaxons cut off. In the sudden quiet, Jake realized he was standing inches from the warrior, close enough to see the intricate patterns etched into her scales, close enough to smell something like ozone and copper. "You have courage," she said, her mental voice softer. "Most humans would have fled." "Most fathers wouldn't," Jake replied. She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Her lower right hand moved almost unconsciously to touch a device on her chest armor. "What is your designation?" "Jake Mitchell, Xenolinguistics Specialist." "And you?" "Kira Talvra, Warden of the Stellar Guard." She paused, her eyes still fixed on his. "Your species is reckless and young, but perhaps not entirely foolish." Before Jake could respond, her primary right hand shot out and gripped his wrist. Pain flared as something hot pressed against his skin. He jerked back, but her strength was absolute. "What are you doing?" he gasped. "Preventing future incidents," Kira said, releasing him. Jake looked at his wrist. Mark glowed there, geometric and complex, slowly fading from bright orange to a dull gray under his skin. "What is this?" "Insurance," Kira said, but something in her mental tone felt uncertain. "If you encounter another artifact, this will prevent activation. It's a standard precaution." Jake's research training screamed that she was lying. Mark looked nothing like a safety device. It looked ceremonial, permanent. But before he could question further, station security burst through the doors, weapons raised. "Stand down," Jake said quickly. She saved the station. Commander Bryant pushed forward, eyeing Kira with barely concealed hostility. "A Dreth warrior, unauthorized, on a human research station. This is a diplomatic incident." Kira's forearms crossed in a gesture that clearly meant dismissal. "Your people triggered a collector weapon. I prevented extinction." "You're welcome, human." The tension in the room could have ignited atmosphere. Jake stepped between them, very aware of the mark still tingling on his wrist. Commander, she's telling the truth. Without her intervention, we'd all be molecular dust right now. Bryant's jaw tightened. You'll both report to debriefing. Now. As security surrounded them, Kira moved close to Jake, her voice entering his mind alone. The mark I gave you is not what I claimed, human. But you will understand soon enough. For now, tell no one what I did. Jake wanted to demand answers, but the way her gold eyes held his made the words die in his throat. There was something there he couldn't name, something that made his pulse race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. They were escorted in opposite directions. As Jake disappeared down one corridor and Kira down another, neither saw the small device on her armor, the one she'd touched now displaying symbols in her language. Mate bond initiated, it read. Compatibility confirmed. Protocol violation acknowledged. In the debriefing room, Commander Bryant threw a tablet onto the table in front of Jake. He sat in a chair designed for interrogation, the mark on his wrist hidden under his sleeve, still warm against his skin. What exactly happened in that lab, Mitchell? Bryant demanded. Jake recounted the events, leaving out only Kira's final words and his suspicions about the mark. Bryant listened, his expression growing darker. The Dreth claim that artifact was stolen from a quarantine world, Bryant said. They're demanding its return and threatening sanctions. Some in their government are calling for harsher measures. It was in our database as a cultural relic, Jake protested. How are we supposed to know? Bryant leaned forward. That warrior Kira Televra, she's not just any Dreth. She's part of their elite warden caste. They don't do diplomatic visits. They hunt threats to the Galactic Order. Her being here means someone high up in their command structure thinks we're dangerous. Are we? Jake asked quietly. Bryant's silence was answer enough. The door opened, and Dr. Lisa Park entered, the station's chief medical officer. She carried a scanning device that looked too sophisticated for standard medical equipment. Commander, I need to examine Mitchell. There are energy signatures that don't match station norms. Jake's hand instinctively moved to cover his marked wrist, but Lisa's sharp eyes caught the motion. Roll up your sleeve, please. He complied slowly. The mark had settled into his skin, looking almost like a tattoo now, silver-gray lines forming patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Lisa's scanner hummed over it, and her eyes widened. Commander, you need to see this. Bryant looked at the display, and his face went pale. Is that what I think it is? Lisa nodded. A Dreth bonding mark. Specifically, a mate bond. According to their cultural database, this is permanent and recognized across all Dreth territories as a claim of partnership. Jake's world tilted. What? No. She said it was a safety precaution. Protection against artifacts. She lied, Bryant said flatly. The question is why? Dreth mate bonds are sacred in their culture. They don't bestow them lightly, and certainly not on aliens. This is unprecedented. The implications crashed over Jake like a wave. Is it dangerous? Can it be removed? Lisa shook her head. Not without killing you. The mark integrates with your nervous system. It's already mapped to your brainstem. As for dangerous, she paused. Physically, no. Politically? Absolutely. If the Dreth Council discovers this, it could spark an interstellar crisis. Their hardliners already view humans as contamination. A warden bonding with a human would be seen as the ultimate betrayal. Jake stood abruptly, his mind racing. I need to talk to her. There has to be an explanation. She's being held in the diplomatic wing, Bryant said, and she's demanded to speak with you specifically. Against my better judgment, I'm going to allow it. But Mitchell, understand this. Whatever game she's playing, you're in the middle of it now. That mark makes you a person of interest to every intelligence agency in human space, and probably several alien ones too. They escorted Jake through the station's secure corridors. Word of the incident had spread, and people stared as he passed. Some looked curious, others afraid. Jake kept his marked wrist hidden, feeling the weight of it like a brand. The diplomatic wing was essentially a gilded cage, comfortable but heavily monitored. Kira stood by the window, her forearms relaxed but her posture radiating controlled power. She turned as Jake entered, and something in her gold eyes made his breath catch. They know, she said simply. Jake held up his wrist. You want to explain why I'm now permanently marked as your mate? I thought Dreth warriors valued honor. This feels like manipulation. Kira moved closer, her height forcing Jake to look up. You misunderstand, human. I did not manipulate you. I saved you. From what? From my people, she said. Her mental voice carried weight, layers of meaning that human language couldn't capture. When I reported the incident, my superiors ordered termination protocols. Any human who activated a collector weapon was to be eliminated as a contamination risk. You specifically were marked for death. Jake's blood ran cold. So you marked me as your mate instead? It was the only protection I could offer, Kira said. Dreth law is absolute in this matter. A bonded mate is sacrosanct, even if that mate is alien. My superiors cannot order your death without declaring war on my entire bloodline. They won't do that, not for one human, no matter how much they disapprove. You sacrificed your standing for me? A stranger? Kira's expression was unreadable, but her voice softened. You stood your ground when death approached. You thought of your child before yourself. You spoke the old words with perfect pronunciation, something even most Dreth cannot do. And when our voices harmonized, she paused. Something in her seemed to hesitate. I felt compatibility that my people spend lifetimes searching for. This is insane, Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. We barely know each other. Time is irrelevant to recognition, Kira replied. My people believe the universe marks compatible souls with certainty. When I touched you, intending only to place a protective sigil, the bond formed itself. That is not something I can force. It only happens when both souls are willing. I didn't will anything, Jake protested. Didn't you? Kira tilted her head. When I gripped your wrist, you could have pulled away. You're not strong enough to break my hold, but I would have released you if you'd truly resisted. Instead, you stayed still. Accepted. Some part of you knew. Jake wanted to argue, but memory betrayed him. In that moment when her hand had gripped his wrist and fire had spread through his veins, he hadn't felt fear. He'd felt certainty, like something clicking into place that had always been misaligned. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now, Kira said, we face consequences together. My people will send investigators. Your people will demand explanations, and we must determine if this bond is mere protection or something more. Jake looked at the mark on his wrist, then at the warrior who'd permanently altered his life. She'd saved him twice now, once from the artifact and once from assassination. But as he met those gold eyes, he realized the most dangerous thing wasn't alien weapons or political fallout. It was the fact that part of him didn't want this bond broken, even if it could be. The investigation team arrived within hours. 5 Draith warriors in full ceremonial armor that made Kira look almost understated by comparison. They filled the diplomatic wing's main chamber, their combined presence suffocating. The lead investigator, a massive male with scarred scales and 6 ceremonial blades strapped across his back, studied Jake like a specimen under glass. Warden Talvra, his mental voice boomed, carrying authority that made even Kira straighten. You have violated sacred protocols. Bonding with an alien, especially one from a species under probation, is forbidden. Explain yourself. Jake felt Kira's tension through the mark, a new sensation that made his head spin. Could he feel her emotions now? Investigator Wrathcore, Kira replied, her mental voice formal and cold. I acted within my rights as a warden. The human demonstrated compatibility during a crisis event. The bond formed naturally when defensive protocols aligned with personal recognition. I followed my instincts, as all warriors are taught. Wrathcore moved closer to Jake, leaning down until they were eye level. His breath smelled of copper and something chemical. You are the human, the linguist who activated a collector weapon? I made a mistake, Jake said, fighting to keep his voice steady. I didn't know what it was. Ignorance that could have destroyed this station, Wrathcore said. He straightened, addressing both of them. The council debates your fate even now. Some call for bond dissolution and human quarantine. Others demand harsher measures. Warden Talvra, your family name protects you, but barely. This human has no such protection. He has my protection, Kira said, moving to stand beside Jake. That is law. Law that assumes proper bonding ceremony, Wrathcore countered. You marked him in secret, without witnesses, without ritual. Some would call this invalid. The mark is set, Kira said flatly. Check him yourself. The integration is complete. Neural, cardiovascular, endocrine. He is mine by every measure that matters. Wrathcore's secondary arms moved to devices on his belt. He approached Jake again, this time with scanners that hummed with energy. Jake held still as alien technology mapped his body, revealing secrets he didn't know he possessed. The investigator's expression shifted from skepticism to shock. This is deeper than standard bonding. Warden, what exactly happened when you marked him? We harmonized voices to contain a weapon, Kira said. Our frequencies aligned perfectly. When I placed the protective mark, it activated a resonance bond instead. I didn't intend this depth of connection. Rathkor studied his scanner, then Jake, then Kira. If this is true, then by our oldest laws, this bond supersedes political concerns. A resonance bond is recognized by the ancestors themselves. To break it would be blasphemy. Relief flooded through Jake, immediately followed by a surge of emotion that wasn't his own. Kira's relief, mixing with his through their connection. However, Rathkor continued, his voice darkening, this does not resolve the political crisis. The human touched what should never be touched. His species must face consequences, bonded or not. What kind of consequences? Jake asked. The investigator's smile was not comforting. You will come to the Dreth homeworld, both of you. You will stand before the council and prove this bond is legitimate. If you fail, Warden Talver will be stripped of rank and exiled. You will be mind-wiped and return to your people with no memory of our existence. The sterile walls of the diplomatic wing felt like they were closing in as Jake processed Rathkor's words. Mind-wiped. The clinical term barely masked the horror of it. Everything he was, everything he'd learned, every memory of his daughter, gone. He felt his hands trembling and forced them still. How do we prove the bond is legitimate? Jake asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Rathkor's golden eyes gleamed with something that might have been cruel amusement. You will undergo the trials of resonance. 3 tests that determine true compatibility. Physical synchronization, where your bodies must move as one in combat. Mental harmonization, where your thoughts must align without telepathic aid. And spiritual recognition, where your souls must prove they were meant to converge. Those trials take Dreth couples years to prepare for, Kira said, her forearms tensing. You're setting us up to fail. I am following protocol, Rathkor replied. If the bond is as deep as my scans suggest, you will succeed. If it is merely a desperate ploy to save a foolish human, you will both pay the price for deception. When? Jake asked. Rathkor consulted a device on his belt. A transport will arrive in 6 cycles, roughly 48 of your hours. Use that time to prepare, or to say your goodbyes if you lack confidence in your connection. The investigators left in a synchronized formation that spoke of military precision. The moment the door sealed, Jake's legs gave out. He caught himself on the edge of a table, his marked wrist burning. This is my fault, he said quietly. I should have left that artifact alone. Kira moved beside him, her lower left hand resting on his shoulder with surprising gentleness. Guilt serves no purpose now. We face this together or not at all. Jake looked up at her, this alien warrior who'd turned his life inside out in the span of hours. Your career, your standing, everything you've worked for, it's all at risk because of me. I made my choice, Kira said. Her mental voice carried absolute certainty. I could have let you die. I didn't. That decision was mine alone. Why? Jake asked, the question that had been burning since she'd marked him. Why risk everything for a human you just met? Kira was silent for a long moment, her gold eyes distant. When I was young, barely more than a juvenile, my mentor told me that a warrior's greatest strength is knowing when to fight and when to protect. I've spent my life fighting threats to order, eliminating dangers before they spread, but when I saw you standing there, refusing to flee, even as death approached, speaking of your child, her voice softened, I saw something worth protecting. Not a threat. A person with courage and love. In that moment, the warrior in me yielded to something deeper. Jake felt his throat tighten. I have to tell my daughter, Emma. She's only 7. She won't understand why I have to leave. How long has she been without her other parent? Kira asked gently. 2 years, Jake said. Her mother died in a transport accident. It's just been us since then. Then she knows about loss, Kira said. And she knows her father is brave. Tell her the truth within what security allows. Children are often stronger than adults believe. Commander Bryant granted Jake 2 hours of supervised contact with Emma. They met in one of the station's observation lounges, with its sweeping views of the star field beyond. Emma ran to him the moment the door opened, her dark hair streaming behind her. Daddy, everyone's saying you're a hero, that you saved the station. Jake knelt and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. He felt the mark on his wrist pulse with warmth, as if responding to his emotion. Something important happened, sweetheart. I need to tell you about it. He explained in simple terms, carefully editing out the parts about near death and political crises. Emma listened with the serious expression she wore when concentrating, her mother's green eyes never leaving his. So you're bonded to an alien warrior? She asked when he finished. Like married? Kind of, Jake said. It's complicated. But, Emma, I have to go away for a little while. To her homeworld. To prove that the bond is real. Emma's lower lip trembled. How long? I don't know, Jake admitted, hating the words. But I promise I'll come back. I always come back. She threw her arms around his neck. You have to, Daddy. You're all I have left. Jake held her until the supervising officer indicated time was up. As he walked Emma back to her guardian, she grabbed his wrist, the marked 1. Her small fingers traced the silver-gray lines. It's pretty, she said. Does it hurt? Not anymore, Jake said. It feels like a reminder that someone cares. Then it's a good thing, Emma said with the simple certainty of childhood. Grandma says that when people care about each other, they can do anything. Jake watched her disappear down the corridor, his heart a knot in his chest. He didn't notice Kira had appeared beside him until she spoke. Your juvenile is strong, she said quietly, like her father. I can't fail, Jake said. I can't leave her alone. Then we won't fail, Kira replied. Come. We have much to learn about each other in very little time. They were given access to the station's training facilities, a large gymnasium that could be configured for various gravity and atmospheric conditions. Kira stood in the center, her forearms moving through a series of forms that looked like a violent dance. The first trial is physical synchronization, she explained. We must move as one, anticipate each other's actions, compensate for each other's weaknesses. Normally, bonded pairs train together for months, building this awareness gradually. We have 2 days, Jake said. Where do we start? Kira stopped her movements and faced him. We start with honesty. I am faster, stronger, and more experienced in combat than you could become in a lifetime. You will be the weak point in our synchronization. Jake bristled despite himself. Thanks for the confidence. I did not say you would fail, Kira continued. I said you are the weak point, which means we must build our synchronization around your strengths, not my superiority. What are you good at, Jake Mitchell? What can you do that I cannot? Jake thought about it, pushing aside his bruised ego. I analyze patterns. Languages, mathematics, behavioral cues. I see connections that others miss. Then that is our foundation, Kira said. In combat, I will be the force. You will be the mind. When we move together, you will read our opponents and guide my strikes through our bond. Your analysis will become my action. How do I guide you through the bond? Jake asked. I can barely feel it except when emotions run high. Because you haven't opened yourself to it, Kira said, moving close. The bond is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Close your eyes. Jake complied, suddenly very aware of her proximity. He could feel heat radiating from her scaled form, hear the steady rhythm of her breathing. Now stop thinking, Kira's voice said in his mind. Stop analyzing. Just feel. Feel the mark on your wrist. Feel where it connects to your core. Follow that connection. Jake focused on the mark. At first there was nothing but warmth. Then, slowly, he felt something else. A thread, thin as spider's silk, running from his wrist up his arm, through his chest, into his mind. And at the other end of that thread he felt her. Not words or thoughts, but essence. Strength tempered by uncertainty. Confidence wrapped around fear. Duty fighting with something softer, something she didn't have words for in either of their languages. I feel you, Jake whispered aloud. And I feel you, Kira replied. Your fear for your child, your determination to survive, your anger at being powerless. And underneath it all, she paused. Curiosity. About me. About us. About what this bond could become. Jake's eyes snapped open. He found Kira's face inches from his, her gold eyes searching. Is that wrong? To be curious? No, Kira said softly. It's necessary. A bond built only on obligation will never pass the trials. There must be genuine connection, genuine desire to understand. I think we have that, Jake Mitchell, despite the chaos of how this began. The next 2 days blurred into an intense cycle of training, rest, and deeper synchronization. Jake learned to feel Kira's movements before she made them, to send impulses through their bond that guided her actions in combat simulations. She learned to trust his analytical mind, to pause her warrior instincts long enough for his pattern recognition to find optimal solutions. They sparred against combat drones, their movements growing smoother with each session. Jake couldn't match Kira's speed or strength, but he didn't need to. It became her eyes in all directions, her tactical processor, her strategic mind. She became his weapon, his shield, his force multiplied 100-fold. Between sessions they talked about everything. Jake told her about Emma, about his late wife, about growing up on Earth with dreams of exploring the stars. Kira told him about Dreth culture, about the rigid caste system that defined every aspect of their lives, about her own struggles as a female warrior in a predominantly male hierarchy. "You're different from what I expected," Jake admitted during one rest period. "The way your people are portrayed in human media, you're all supposed to be cold and calculating. All warrior, no person underneath." Kira made a sound that might have been laughter. "And humans are supposed to be chaotic children playing with forces beyond their comprehension. Propaganda serves its purpose on both sides." "Is any of it true?" Jake asked. "Some," Kira admitted. "My people do value order over freedom. We do see humans as reckless. But we also envy you, though few would admit it. Your passion, your adaptability, your refusal to accept predetermined roles, these are strengths we've bred out of ourselves in pursuit of perfection." "It sounds lonely," Jake said quietly. "It is," Kira replied, "until it isn't." Their eyes met, and Jake felt the bond pulse between them, stronger now, more defined. It wasn't just a connection anymore. It was becoming something real, something chosen rather than forced. The transport arrived exactly when Rathcore promised, a sleek vessel that dwarfed the research station. Jake stood in the docking bay, a small bag containing everything he was allowed to bring. Commander Bryan had arranged for Emma to stay with her grandmother on Earth, sparing her the uncertainty of waiting on the station. Jake had recorded a message for her, trying to sound confident and brave. He hoped it was enough. "Ready?" Kira asked, appearing beside him in formal armor that marked her as a warden of the Stellar Guard. "No," Jake said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." "That is the definition of courage," Kira said. Her lower right hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "Whatever happens on my world, know that I will stand with you." They boarded the transport together, and as the airlock sealed behind them, Jake took one last look at the station. At the life he was leaving behind, temporarily or permanently depending on how the next few days went. The bond on his wrist glowed faintly, warm and steady. A reminder that he wasn't facing this alone. The Dreth homeworld emerged from the darkness of space like a jewel, carved from violet and silver. 3 moons orbited in perfect geometric alignment, their paths calculated to the millisecond. Even from orbit, Jake could see the mathematical precision of the cities below, each structure placed with deliberate purpose in patterns that spoke of a civilization obsessed with order. "Beautiful," Jake murmured, pressed against the viewport of their cabin. Kira stood behind him, close enough that he felt her presence even without the bond. "To you, perhaps. To me, it is a cage gilded with tradition." The transport descended through atmospheric layers, passing enormous orbital platforms that served as both defensive stations and cultural monuments. Everything gleamed pristine and perfect. No weather-worn buildings, no chaotic sprawl. Every element existed in harmony with a grand design that left no room for improvisation. They landed at the Capitol Spire, a structure that stretched 5 miles into the sky, its surface covered in symbols that Jake's linguist brain immediately began trying to decipher. Rathcore waited at the base with an escort of 12 warriors, their ceremonial armor marking them as Council Guard. "Warden Talvra," Rathcore said formally. "Human Jake Mitchell. The Council convenes at sunset. You have 4 hours to prepare. Use them wisely." They were taken to quarters in the Warden compound, rooms that were technically luxurious but felt more like a well-appointed cell. Jake paced while Kira stood motionless, her forearms crossed in a meditative pose. "Tell me about the Council," Jake said. "Who are they? What do they value?" Kira's eyes opened. "The Council consists of 7 elders, each representing one of the great houses. They value tradition above all else. Order second and individual desire not at all. They will see our bond as chaos incarnate, a violation of natural law." "How do we convince them otherwise?" "We don't," Kira said simply. "We convince ourselves. The trials don't test what we show the Council. They test what we truly are together. If doubt exists between us, the trials will expose it. If genuine connection exists, that too will be revealed." Jake stopped pacing. "Are you doubtful?" Kira met his gaze. "Ask me through the bond. Don't accept my words." "Feel the truth." Jake closed his eyes and reached out through their connection. He felt her immediately, clearer now than ever before, and what he found wasn't doubt. It was fear, yes, but fear for him, for what failure would mean for him. Something that felt almost like hope. Fragile and uncertain, but growing stronger. When he opened his eyes, Kira was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What did you find?" "The same thing you feel from me, I think," Jake said quietly. "This bond started as protection, but it's becoming something real." "Yes," Kira agreed, "and that terrifies me more than any trial. A chime announced visitors. The door opened to reveal 3 Draith females in robes marking them as bond witnesses, traditional escorts for those undergoing the trials of resonance. Warden Talvrad, the eldest, said, her mental voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We come to prepare you both for what lies ahead. The trials have not been attempted by a cross-species pair in over 600 cycles. The protocols must be adapted. Will that make them easier or harder?" Jake asked. The bond witness turned her ancient eyes on him. "Neither. It will make them true. The trials care nothing for species or tradition. They care only for resonance. If you possess it, you will succeed. If you do not, no amount of preparation will save you." They spent the next hours learning the structure of each trial. The physical synchronization would involve combat against holographic opponents designed to test their coordination. The mental harmonization would require them to solve complex problems together while separated and unable to communicate verbally. The spiritual recognition would take them into a shared meditation state where their deepest selves would be laid bare. "The trials will be public," the bond witness explained. "The council requires witnesses to verify legitimacy. Thousands will watch." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Thousands?" "It is tradition," Kira said, but her own unease rippled through their bond. "We cannot change it." As sunset approached, they were led to the Chamber of Resonance, an enormous amphitheater carved from crystalline stone that amplified both light and sound. Tiered seating rose in perfect circles around a central platform. Every seat was filled with Dreth citizens, their scales ranging from deep purple to silver white, all watching in absolute silence. The council sat at the highest tier, 7 figures in robes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their combined mental presence pressed down on the chamber like a physical weight. Warden Kira Talvra, the central elder, said, her mental voice resonating through every mind present. Human Jake Mitchell. "You stand before us to prove a bond that defies natural order. 3 trials await. Success means recognition across all Dreth territories. Failure means dissolution and consequences, as previously stated. Do you accept these terms?" "We accept," Kira said, her mental voice strong and clear. Jake simply nodded, not trusting his own telepathic abilities in front of this audience. "Then let the first trial begin." The platform beneath them shifted, forming a combat arena. Holographic opponents materialized, 6 Dreth warriors in full battle configuration. The bond witness had warned them this would happen, that the trial would pit them against impossible odds designed to force perfect synchronization or crushing defeat. "Stay close," Kira sent through their bond. "Let your mind guide my body." The opponents attacked simultaneously, a coordinated assault that would have overwhelmed any individual fighter. But Jake wasn't fighting. He was analyzing, seeing patterns in their movements, calculating angles and timing. He fed this information through the bond as pure impulse, and Kira responded instantly. Her upper arms deflected strikes while her lower arms countered, her body moving through space with liquid precision. But it wasn't just her anymore. Jake's awareness merged with hers, his pattern recognition anticipating attacks before they developed. When an opponent feinted left, Jake knew it was going right, and Kira was already there, her counterstrike perfectly placed. They moved as one organism, separate bodies united by purpose and connection. Jake felt every impact Kira absorbed, and she felt every calculation he processed. The bond between them sang with energy, growing stronger with each passing moment. The holographic opponents increased in difficulty, their attacks more complex, their patterns less predictable. But Jake and Kira adapted, their synchronization deepening until there was no delay between thought and action, between analysis and execution. When the last opponent fell, the chamber erupted in a sound like wind through stone, the Dreth equivalent of applause. Jake was breathing hard, his shirt soaked with sweat. Kira stood tall, barely winded, but through their bond he felt her exhaustion, carefully hidden from observers. "The first trial is satisfied," the central elder announced. "Mental harmonization begins immediately." Before Jake could catch his breath, walls of light rose around him, separating him from Kira. He could still feel her through the bond, but dimly, like a voice heard through water. The bond witness had warned them this would happen, that the second trial would test their ability to think as one without direct contact. A holographic display appeared before him, showing a complex mathematical puzzle that seemed to shift and change even as he looked at it. Somewhere in her own light cage, Kira would be seeing a different part of the same puzzle. They had to solve it together, their solutions combining to form a complete answer. But they couldn't communicate verbally or see each other's work. Jake stared at the equations, his mind racing. This was his element, patterns and numbers and logical progression, but he couldn't solve it alone. He needed Kira's perspective, her way of seeing the world. He reached out through the bond, pushing past the dampening effect of the light walls. It was like shouting into a storm. his thoughts scattering before they could form coherent shapes. But he felt Kira reaching back, her mind touching his, even across the barrier. They couldn't share words, but they could share understanding. Jake saw the patterns his way, mathematical progressions and linguistic symmetries. Kira saw them her way, geometric harmonies and tactical sequences. Where his analysis hit a wall, her perspective showed a path forward. Where her approach led to contradiction, his logic found resolution. They worked in a space that existed between thought and feeling, between analysis and instinct. The puzzle began to yield, its complexity unraveling as two different minds approached it as one consciousness, time-lost meaning. Jake's fingers moved across the holographic interface, inputting solutions that came from somewhere beyond his individual knowledge. Beside him, though he couldn't see her, Kira did the same. The final piece clicked into place, and the light walls dissolved. Jake stumbled, dizzy from the mental exertion. Kira caught him, her forearm steadying him with surprising gentleness. Through their bond, he felt her pride in him, in them. They'd done what most bonded Dreth pairs needed months of practice to achieve. "The second trial is satisfied," the Elder announced, and this time there was something like surprise in her mental voice. "The final trial begins at dawn. Use the night to prepare your spirits." They were escorted back to their quarters, both of them too exhausted to speak. But as they rested, Jake felt Kira's mind brushing against his, seeking comfort and offering the same. The bond between them had become a lifeline, a source of strength neither had expected. Tomorrow would determine everything. But tonight, they had each other. Dawn came too quickly, painting the violet sky with shades of amber and gold. Jake stood on a balcony overlooking the Capitol spire, trying to calm the nervous energy coursing through him. The first two trials had been intense, but they'd been concrete. Physical action, mental puzzles, things he could grasp and engage with directly. The spiritual recognition was different. The bond witness had been deliberately vague about its nature, saying only that it would reveal the truth of their souls, whether they were meant to converge or whether their bond was merely convenient circumstances dressed up as destiny. "You are afraid," Kira said, joining him on the balcony. Her forearms crossed in that meditative pose he'd learned meant she was processing complex emotions. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "At least in the other trials I knew what to do. This one feels like jumping off a cliff and hoping I can fly." "An apt metaphor," Kira said. Her gold eyes reflected the sunrise, making them look almost human for a moment. "The spiritual trial strips away all pretense, all self-deception. It will show us who we truly are beneath the roles we play. For you, that means confronting whether you accept this bond willingly or whether you're simply trying to survive. For me," she paused, "it means confronting whether I marked you out of genuine recognition or whether I simply couldn't bear to let another being die on my watch. What do you think the answer is?" Jake asked quietly. "I think we're about to find out," Kira replied. The chamber of resonance was somehow even more crowded than the previous day. Word had spread across the homeworld that a human and a Dreth warrior were attempting the full trials. Jake spotted Wrathcore in the audience, his expression unreadable. The council sat in their high seats, 7 judges whose decision would determine everything. The central platform had been transformed overnight. Now it held 2 meditation pods, crystalline structures that looked like they'd been grown rather than built. Between them a pillar of light hummed with energy that made Jake's teeth ache. "Warden Talvra, Human Mitchell," the central elder said. "The final trial requires you to enter a shared consciousness, a space where your spirits will either recognize each other as true mates or reveal the bond as false. Be warned. This trial has broken the minds of those who entered it with lies in their hearts. If you harbor doubts, it is not too late to withdraw." "We do not withdraw," Kira said firmly. Jake wanted to echo her confidence, but his mouth was too dry. Managed a nod, then enter the pods. The crystalline structures opened like flowers, revealing interiors that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. Jake climbed into his pod, feeling the material mold itself to his body. Across from him, Kira did the same, her larger form filling her pod completely. The material closed over them, warm and strangely comfortable. Jake's last view of the physical world was the pillar of light between them, pulsing brighter and brighter until it consumed everything. Then he was falling. No, not falling. Dissolving. The boundaries that defined Jake Mitchell as separate from the universe blurred and faded. He felt himself dispersing like ink in water, losing coherence, losing identity. Panic surged, primal and overwhelming. If he couldn't hold on to himself, what would be left? Just as he thought he'd vanished completely, he felt something else. Another consciousness, also dissolving. also afraid. Kira. He recognized her essence even without form, and she recognized his. They reached for each other in that formless space, two patterns of consciousness seeking stability, seeking connection. And when they touched, something remarkable happened. They saw each other, not with eyes, but with something deeper. Jake saw Kira's entire life, not as a sequence of events, but as a tapestry of experience and emotion. He felt her childhood in the warrior creches, learning to fight before she learned to speak. He felt her isolation, always too questioning for her rigid society, never quite fitting the mold her caste demanded. He felt her loneliness, decades of service to a culture that valued her skills but not her person. It hadn't been calculation or political maneuvering, it had been recognition, soul deep and undeniable, of a kindred spirit facing death with dignity. She'd seen herself in him, the part of herself that didn't fit, the part that chose connection over protocol. Kira saw Jake just as completely. She felt his grief for his wife, a wound that hadn't healed despite 2 years of trying. She felt his love for Emma, fierce and protective and absolute. She felt his curiosity about the universe, his need to understand and connect and find meaning in chaos. And she felt his fear, not of her or the trials, but of opening himself to loss again, of caring about someone who might be taken away. But beneath all of it, they both felt something else, a recognition that went beyond circumstance or survival. Their patterns of consciousness, their essential selves stripped of all pretense, fit together like pieces of a puzzle that had been separated for far too long. The bond wasn't a cage or a protection or a political tool. It was truth. They were meant to find each other, however improbable the circumstances, however different their species. The formless space began to take shape around them, forming into something neither of them expected. It was a room, small and warm, with 2 chairs by a window overlooking stars. Emma sat in one chair, older than she was now, maybe 16 or 17, and beside her sat a young Dreth, female, with scales that mixed human skin tones with traditional Dreth purple. Is this? Jake started to ask, but he already knew. This was possibility. This was what their bond could become if they chose it fully. Our daughter, Kira said, her voice filled with wonder. But how? Our species shouldn't be able to produce offspring. The rules of biology don't apply here, a voice said. The Central Elder materialized in the space, though Jake understood this was just a representation, a way for the trial to communicate. This is the deepest level of recognition. You see not just what is, but what could be. The universe shows you this not as guarantee, but as potential. The question is, do you want it? Jake looked at the scene before them. Emma, happy and whole, with a sister she'd never asked for but clearly loved. Kira, standing behind them both with an expression of peace Jake had never seen on her face. And himself, older, content, belonging to a family that transcended everything that should have kept them apart. Yes, Jake said, I want this. I choose this. Kira's consciousness wrapped around his, warm and certain. I choose this too. I choose you. I choose us. The vision faded, but the connection remained. They rose back through layers of consciousness, reuniting with their bodies, with their individual selves. But they weren't the same beings who'd entered the pods. The bond between them was no longer just a mark on skin or a thread in their minds. It was woven into the fabric of who they were. The pods opened. Jake climbed out on shaking legs, his eyes immediately finding Kira. She stood tall, her forearms spread wide, and through their bond he felt her joy, her relief, her absolute certainty. The chamber was silent. Every Dreth present watched them with expressions Jake couldn't read. Even the council seemed momentarily at a loss. Finally, the Central Elder spoke. We have witnessed what you witnessed, we have felt what you felt, and we must acknowledge what we see. The bond is legitimate, the resonance is true. Against all probability and precedent, a human and a Dreth have achieved complete spiritual recognition. She stood, and the other council members rose with her. Warden Kira Talvra, you are hereby recognized as validly bonded to human Jake Mitchell. All rights and privileges of bonded status are granted to you both. And human Jake Mitchell, she turned her ancient eyes on him, you are granted honorary status as a citizen of the Dreth Confederacy. Your daughter will be afforded protection and education rights as well. Jake's knees went weak with relief. We passed? You exceeded, the elder said. The depth of resonance you achieved in 3 days typically takes bonded pairs years to develop. You have shown us something we believed impossible, that compatibility transcends species, that the universe recognizes souls meant to converge regardless of the forms they wear. The chamber erupted in that wind-through stone sound, louder than before. Jake felt hands, claws on his shoulders as Dreth citizens approached to offer congratulations. Through their bond, he felt Kira's amazement. Her people, so rigid and traditional, were accepting them. Efcor approached, his massive form somehow less intimidating than before. "Warden Talvra," he said formally, then added, "Your bonded mate fought well for a human." Jake couldn't help but laugh. "Coming from you? That's practically poetry." The investigator's expression might have been a smile. "You have given my people much to consider, Human Mitchell. Perhaps we have been too rigid in our understanding of order and natural law. Perhaps there is room for variables we did not account for." Over the following hours, Jake and Kira were bombarded with questions, offers of cultural exchange programs, and requests for interviews about their experience. The political implications were enormous. A successful cross-species bond could open doors that had been sealed by prejudice and fear. But through it all, Jake's mind kept returning to one thought: Emma. He needed to get back to her, to tell her everything was going to be okay. Better than okay, actually. Kira must have felt his thoughts because she squeezed his hand with her lower right hand. "We can leave tomorrow," she sent through their bond. "Tonight we celebrate. Tomorrow we go home." Home, Jake realized, now meant something different than it had a week ago. It meant wherever they were together, human and Dreth, father and warrior, two souls that had found each other against all odds. That night, they stood together on a balcony overlooking the Capitol spire, watching 3 moons rise in perfect geometric alignment. The mark on Jake's wrist glowed faintly, in harmony with an identical mark that had appeared on Kira's lower right arm during the spiritual trial. "I should be terrified," Jake said quietly. "Everything in my life has changed in a matter of days. I've bonded with an alien warrior, become part of a culture I barely understand, and somehow committed to a future I can't fully imagine." "But you're not terrified," Kira said. "I can feel it." "No," Jake agreed. "I'm not. Nervous, yes. Uncertain about 1,000 details, absolutely. But terrified? Not at all. Because whatever comes next, we face it together." Kira's 4 arms wrapped around him, gentle despite their strength. "On my world there is an old saying, the universe does not make mistakes with souls. It simply takes its time bringing them together. I believe we were always meant to find each other, Jake Mitchell." Whether we were ready for it or not, Jake leaned into her embrace, feeling the steady rhythm of her hearts through their bond. Then, "I'm glad the universe has a sense of humor. Because this might be the most improbable love story ever told." "Love story," Kira repeated, testing the human words. "Yes, I believe that's what this is becoming." They stood there as night deepened around them, 2 beings from different worlds learning to be one. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integrating their lives, helping Emma adjust to having an alien stepmother, navigating the political complexities of their bond. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight they simply existed together, 2 souls that had recognized each other across the impossible vastness of space and time. And that, Jake thought, was miracle enough. The transport back to the research station felt different than the journey to the Dreth homeworld. Then, Jake had been traveling toward uncertainty and possible doom. Now, he was traveling toward a future he could actually imagine, one that included both his daughter and his bonded mate. Kira sat beside him in the cabin, reviewing diplomatic documents on a holographic display. The Dreth Council had wasted no time capitalizing on their successful bonding, drafting proposals for cultural exchange programs, joint research initiatives, and revised first contact protocols that acknowledged the possibility of cross-species compatibility. "You're famous now," Jake said, watching her work. "The Dreth warrior who proved bonds could transcend species. How does that feel?" Kira made a sound that might have been amusement. "Strange. I've spent my career enforcing order and eliminating threats. Now I'm a symbol of chaos and possibility. The irony is not lost on me." "Is it chaos, though?" Jake asked. "Or is it just a more complex kind of order than your people were willing to see?" Kira's gold eyes met his. "That is the question the Council now debates. Some see our bond as proof that the universe is more flexible than our rigid laws suggest. Others see it as an aberration that will lead to the decay of our culture. What do you see it as?" Kira set aside her work and took Jake's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally now. "I see it as the best decision I ever made," she said simply. "Everything else is politics. This, you and I, that's real." The mark on Jake's wrist pulsed warmly at her words, the bond between them humming with shared emotion. He'd grown so accustomed to it now that he couldn't imagine not feeling her presence in the back of his mind, a constant companion and source of strength. "How do you think Emma will react to you?" Jake asked. "I've told her about you through messages, but meeting you in person is different." Children adapt more readily than adults, Kira said, but I understand your concern. I am, after all, quite different from human mothers. You're going to be great, Jake said, with more confidence than he felt. Emma's been asking about you constantly. She wants to know if you can teach her to fight. Kira's expression softened in a way that still looked alien but was becoming increasingly familiar to Jake. If she wishes to learn, I will teach her. But perhaps we start with basic self-defense rather than Dreth combat forms. The station came into view, a small cluster of modules orbiting a mining asteroid. It looked tiny compared to the massive structures of the Dreth homeworld, but to Jake it represented home, safety, normalcy, or at least what passed for normalcy in his life now. Commander Bryant met them at the docking bay, his expression carefully neutral. Mitchell, Warden Talvera, welcome back. I trust your visit to the homeworld was, he paused, searching for words, successful? We passed the trials, Jake said. The bond is recognized as legitimate, and I'm now technically an honorary citizen of the Dreth Confederacy. Bryant's eyebrows rose. Well, that's certainly unprecedented. The diplomatic corps is going to have a field day with this. And speaking of which, he handed Jake a datapad. You've both been requested for about 40 different interviews, 3 documentary projects, and 1 rather aggressive marriage counseling offer from a Terran therapy group. Hard pass on the therapy, Jake said, scrolling through the messages. Most of these can wait. Right now, I just want to see my daughter. She's waiting in Observation Lounge 3, Bryant said. Fair warning, she's been telling everyone about her alien stepmom. You're going to have a lot of explaining to do. The walk to the observation lounge felt both too long and too short. Jake's heart hammered as they approached the door. What if Emma was afraid of Kira? What if she felt betrayed that Jake had bonded with someone so soon after her mother's death? What if this entire situation was too much for a 7-year-old to process? Kira's hand squeezed his shoulder. She will surprise you, she sent through their bond. Children often do. The door opened and Emma looked up from the viewport where she'd been watching the stars. Her eyes widened as she took in Kira's full height, her 4 arms, her scaled armor, her distinctly alien features. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emma broke into the biggest smile Jake had ever seen. You're huge, she exclaimed, running toward them. And you have 4 arms. That's so cool. Can you pick me up? I want to see how tall you are. Kira looked at Jake, her gold eyes questioning. Jake nodded, and with surprising gentleness, Kira's lower arms lifted Emma up to her eye level. Emma giggled, her dark hair bouncing. You're the warrior who saved my dad, Emma said seriously. Thank you. He's all I have left, so I'm really glad you kept him safe. Something in Kira's expression cracked, the warrior facade giving way to genuine emotion. Your father is brave and strong, little one. He saved me as much as I saved him. How? Emma asked with the direct curiosity of childhood. He reminded me that there are things worth protecting, Kira said. People worth risking everything for. Like he would risk everything for you. Emma considered this, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. So you're going to stay with us? Be part of our family? If you'll have me, Kira said. I know I'm different from what you're used to. Good, Emma said firmly. Different is interesting. Mom always said interesting people make life worth living. She set her small hand on one of Kira's larger ones. I think you're very interesting, and I think my dad really likes you, even though he gets all nervous when he looks at you. I do not get nervous, Jake protested, feeling his face heat. You totally do, Emma said, grinning. It's okay, Dad. I think it's nice. You haven't been happy like this since Mom died. The observation fell silent except for the gentle hum of the station's life support. Jake felt tears prick his eyes, overwhelmed by his daughter's acceptance, her emotional intelligence, her ability to see what he'd been trying to hide even from himself. Come here, you two, he said, opening his arms. Kira set Emma down gently, and they all came together in an embrace that would have looked bizarre to any observer. A human man, a 7-year-old girl, and a 7-foot-tall 4-armed alien warrior, holding each other in the soft glow of starlight. This is my family now, Jake thought, feeling complete in a way he hadn't since his wife's death. Through their bond, he felt Kira's agreement, her joy, her commitment to protecting and loving both of them. And in Emma's fierce hug, he felt his daughter's resilience, her capacity to adapt and accept and love without reservation. The universe might not make mistakes with souls, but it sure had a funny way of bringing them together. The weeks following their return settled into a new kind of normal. Jake returned to his work in xenolinguistics, though now with a much more personal interest in Dreth language and culture. Kira took a position as the station's security liaison, using her expertise to train the human security forces in combat techniques while also serving as a cultural bridge between species. Emma adapted to having an alien stepmother with the kind of enthusiasm only a child could muster. She insisted on learning basic Dreth combat forms, which Kira taught her with infinite patience. She asked endless questions about the homeworld, about Dreth customs, about what it was like to have 4 arms, and she started calling Kira Mom, which never failed to make the warrior's expression soften in that particular way Jake had learned meant she was deeply moved. They weren't without challenges. Jake's extended family on Earth had mixed reactions to his bonding, ranging from supportive to deeply uncomfortable. Some of his colleagues at the station treated him differently now, either with awe or wariness, and there were still political factions on both the human and Dreth sides who saw their bond as everything from a publicity stunt to a dangerous precedent, but through it all, they had each other. The bond that had started as a desperate act of protection had grown into something neither of them could have predicted. It wasn't always easy, bridging 2 species with vastly different biology, psychology, and cultural expectations, but it was real, and it was theirs. 6 months after the trials, Jake woke to find Kira standing by the window of their quarters, her forearms crossed in that meditative pose. Dawn was breaking over the asteroid field, painting their room in shades of amber and gold. "Can't sleep?" he asked, joining her. "I was thinking," Kira said, her mental voice contemplative, "about the vision we saw during the spiritual trial. The daughter who existed between our species." Jake remembered it vividly. The young Dreth-human hybrid, impossible by all known biology, yet shown to them as potential. "Do you think it was real, or just symbolic?" "I don't know," Kira admitted. "But I've been researching. There are ancient texts in our archives, stories of cross-species bonding from thousands of cycles ago, before my people became so rigid. Some of those stories mention offspring, children who carried traits from both parents. Are you saying you want to try?" Jake asked carefully. "I'm saying I want to explore the possibility," Kira replied. "The Council has agreed to genetic research, to see if our DNA could be compatible with current technology. If it's possible," she turned to face him, her gold eyes holding his. "Would you want that? Another child?" Jake thought about Emma, about the joy and terror of parenthood, about the complexity of raising a hybrid child in a galaxy that barely accepted cross-species bonding. "Yes," he said finally. "If it's possible, yes. I want that with you." Kira's relief flooded through their bond. "I was afraid you would say no. That one child would be enough?" "One child is never enough when you have room in your heart for more," Jake said. "My mom used to say that." She was right. They stood together as the sun rose, planning a future that seemed impossible but felt inevitable. They'd already defied the odds once. What was one more impossibility? The research took months. Dreth and human geneticists worked together, sharing knowledge that had been kept separate for generations. They discovered that while natural reproduction was impossible, genetic engineering could create a viable hybrid embryo, one that would carry traits from both species. The ethical debates were fierce. Some argued it was playing God, creating life where nature had drawn a clear boundary. Others saw it as the ultimate expression of their bond, proof that love could transcend not just culture but biology itself. Emma's opinion settled the matter. "I want a sister," she announced firmly when Jake and Kira explained the possibility. "And I don't care if she has scales or extra arms or anything else." Annie. The procedure was approved, and 9 months later, Jake stood in a medical bay holding the most beautiful impossibility he'd ever seen. His and Kira's daughter, opened eyes that were gold with round pupils, a perfect blend of both species. Her skin was human-toned, but with subtle patterns that might have been scales or might have been freckles. She had 2 arms, human proportion, but with Dreth joint flexibility. "She is perfect," Kira breathed, all 4 of her arms trembling as she reached for their daughter. "What should we name her?" Jake asked. Kira thought for a moment. "In Dreth tradition, we name children after the quality we hope they embody. I think," she paused, her gold eyes meeting Jake's, "Harmony. We should name her Harmony." Emma, standing on her tiptoes to see her new sister, nodded enthusiastically. "Harmony Mitchell Talvera." "I like it." Jake looked at his family, at the daughter who'd shown him how to love unconditionally, at the mate who'd taught him courage, at the newborn who represented everything impossible made real. This was his life now, stranger and more wonderful than anything he could have imagined. The alien warrior had marked him as her mate, yes. But in doing so, she'd given him something he'd thought he'd lost forever, a future worth fighting for, a family worth protecting, and a love that transcended everything the universe threw at them. Years from now, when Harmony was old enough to understand, he'd tell her the story about how her parents met in chaos, bonded in crisis and built a family from impossibility. He'd tell her that she was proof that the universe had a plan, even when that plan looked like disaster from the outside. But for now, he simply held his newborn daughter close, feeling Kira's presence through their bond, hearing Emma's excited chatter and marveling at how one moment of choice, one desperate act of protection, had led to this. The Dreth warrior had told him not to touch that artifact. But moments later, she'd marked him as her mate. And in doing so, she'd changed not just his life, but the entire galaxy's understanding of what was possible when different souls recognized each other. Some would call it chaos. Jake called it family. And he wouldn't change a thing.